Hi guys, it's Miss Mac. Today we're going to do a demo for the bracket. So make sure that when you get a new part, it's very important to read the instructions before you begin. So first thing is we need to start a new part in the inch. So we're going to do the standard inch IPT. And it also tells us that we're going to start a new 2D sketch on the XY plane. And we're going to make a shape that's called the tombstone. So I'm going to use my line tool and I'm going to draw a basic tombstone shape. And then I will come back in later to put my dimensions. So now that I have my shape, I'm going to come and use my dimension tool. And so the dimension for this line, the height of this is going to be 3.5 inches. And the arc has a radius of 0.75. So now that I have my tombstone, I can finish my sketch. And when I extrude it, I want to extrude this sketch 0.25 inches. So now that I have my basic shape, this is where we're going to start. The next thing we need to do is we need to create a hole. So now that I'm looking at my shape, it's a little off, it's a little askew. So I want to come back in, I'm going to open up sketch 1, and I am going to edit this. In other words, I'm going to put a constraint on this because I want this tangent. So now that's moved everything out. There we go. So now I have the tombstone. The next thing I need to do is I need to put a hole at the top. So I'm going to use my hole feature and I'm going to change the placement from linear to concentric so that the holes line up and they match the circle or the arc that is there. So I'm going to place my hole and then I'm going to touch my arc, telling that hole it needs to be concentric or match this arc. So now that we have our hole placed, I need to look at the description or the window picture that they have in my instructions. So the first thing they say is that we need to make this hole countersunk. So we're going to select countersink. And then we're going to use the dimensions that they give us. So the first thing is the width at the top, which is going to be 0.51. The angle of this is going to be 100. And the width at the bottom is going to be 0.27 inches. And we're going to change the termination to through all, and then we're going to apply. So now we have our hole matches our arc. We can move on to the next. So the next thing we need to do is we need to create a rectangle and we need to extrude that rectangle 0.5 inches. So the first thing we need to do is we need to start a new 2D sketch on this face. I'm going to bring it down because we're going to sketch this right underneath here. So we're going to come and we're going to use a 2-point center rectangle. So we're going to start here in the middle and we're going to pull it out. Okay, like such. So now we have our rectangle. We can finish this sketch and go to extrude. So I'm going to turn this and make sure it's coming out in the right direction, and it is. And we need to change the distance from 0.25 to 0.5. So now we have our rectangle extruded sitting right underneath the hole that we just created. The next thing we need to do is we need to put a curved shape on this rectangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this around and we're going to sketch that tombstone on the top of this rectangle. So again, we're going to start a new 2D sketch on the top of this rectangle. And we're going to make another tombstone like we did before. And this part always gives me the blues, but I'm not going to let that deter me. I'm actually going to do something that makes it easier for me, in that I'm going to turn it around because this is how I'm used to making a tombstone. And then I'm going to take this line that I drew and I'm going to delete it and start over. Good. So I'm going to come back to my line tool and I'm going to draw my tombstone like I normally would. And I'm going to pull it over and make sure it touches and I get that green dot. And okay, so now I have my tombstone. I can finish this sketch. And if I were to read, we need to make this tombstone, but we're going to extrude it. We're going to change that direction so it's going down. And we want to change that direction to 2. And the reason we're going to change that, because if we ever change the depth of the rectangle, we want it to match. So there. So now we have our tombstone added to the rectangle that we just drew. Now this is the last part, because this bracket, we're going to mirror everything to create the other side. So the last thing we need to do is we need to put a hole in this last tombstone that we just drew. I'm going to zoom in. So again, we're going to use our hole feature. We want this again to be concentric. So we're going to place our hole and we're going to touch our arc to make sure that it is concentric. And then now they tell us we want to counter bore. So we have the dimensions for counter bore. And so this needs to be changed to 0.44 inch. I'm sorry, I have this on countersink. So glad I looked at it. And the reason I know that is when I look at my directions, the picture does not match what I have on my screen because I was in countersink and not counter bore. So now that I'm in counter bore, I'm going to make sure that my dimensions match up. So the width is going to be 0.44. We're going to have a depth of 0.25. And we're going to have a width of 0.27. And so we're going to change the termination and we're going to make it 2. And what we want to do is we want to say, hey, I want this to come to the bottom of this face, and click apply. And now we have our hole. And the reason again that we want to use that 2 function is because if we ever change the depth of that rectangle that we started with, it will all match up. If we don't make it 2, it's just going to hover and it won't look proper. So now that we have our top half of our bracket, the next thing we want to do is we want to mirror everything that we have here. So we're going to come in and use the mirror feature, not a tool, the mirror feature. So we're going to mirror. We want to mirror everything. So we want to mirror the solids, and we need to tell it where we're going to mirror it. Nope, don't want it there. I want it there. Notice it's going to flip it. So this is the directions. I can change it. So I wanted to flip it and say okay, and it just mirrored everything that I did. So the good part about using the mirror feature is that I can just do everything once and get the exact same thing, mirror it on the other side, and I don't have to draw everything again. So again, this is your bracket. I hope you guys find this video helpful, and I look forward to seeing your bracket. Have a good day and enjoy.